Imagine you're trying to build an artificial human brain.
Okay.
But instead of biology, you're using silicon, copper, glass, and you spend literally billions of dollars and years of time just getting this massive neural network to learn everything there is to know about the world.
Right. It reads the whole internet. Masters,
Uh-huh.
physics, poetry, all of it.
Exactly. But then the very second you ask this incredibly expensive brain to actually do something for you in the real world, it just freezes.
Wow. Because it can't remember where it put its keys.
Right. It is brilliantly educated, but it's, practically paralyzed the moment it needs to act.
Hmm.
It has all the processing power in the world, but it is fundamentally starved for immediate recall.
Which is a terrifying image, honestly.
It really is. And that image, that incredibly powerful yet strangely bottlenecked brain, is the exact reality of the global AI industry right now.
Yeah, we are seeing this across the board.
So, to figure out what's going on, we are pulling from a massive stack of mid-July 2026 tech dispatches from DigiTimes. We also have this exclusive industry analysis from KuCoin and a really revealing June 2026 Investor Day presentation from the flash memory giant Kioxia.
It's a lot of dense material.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive today is to cut through all that tech jargon. We need to figure out why the biggest AI companies on the planet are completely ripping up and rewriting how they build the physical brains of AI.
And crucially, what that means for you listening.
Exactly. From the price of your next smartphone all the way to the stability of the global power grid. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to understand the hardware market right now, you first have to look at how the fundamental nature of AI usage has shifted entirely in 2026.
Right. Because it's not what it was a couple of years ago.
Not at all. For the past few years, the entire industry was obsessed with the training phase. I mean, that was all about building the large language models. You feed massive amounts of data into a supercomputer for months on end just to teach it how to speak and reason.
Which is a massive one-time upfront cost.
Right. But now, we have decisively entered the inference phase.
And inference being the moment the model is actually running live out in the real world.
Exactly. Answering your questions, generating images, doing the actual daily work. According to that KuCoin analysis, inference now accounts for roughly 2/3 of all AI compute power.
2/3. That is a massive structural shift in the global data center footprint.
It is. We are moving away from the old paradigm where, user types a simple query into a chatbot, gets a text response, and the transaction's just over.
Yeah, the sources point to something much bigger driving this footprint, which is the rise of agentic AI. And I want to make sure we understand the mechanism here because it really explains the sheer scale of the hardware problem.
Right. It's not just more users asking questions. It's how the AI answers them now.
Yes. What's fascinating is the multiplier effect of an agent. Like, let's say you don't just ask an AI to give you a recipe for dinner. Instead, you give an agentic AI a broad goal, like plan my family's meals for the week, order the groceries to my house, and keep it under a $200 budget.
Oh, man. That is a completely different beast.
Right. The agent essentially spins up other AI models to figure this out. It has to pause, query a grocery database, check live prices, cross-reference your dietary restrictions, verify delivery times, execute the payment.
So a single request from you at your laptop just triggered, 50 or 100 independent cyclical inference calls in a data center somewhere.
Exactly. The workload doesn't just increase linearly, it compounds exponentially.
And when you have hundreds of millions of users running agentic workflows simultaneously, the underlying hardware, the actual silicon processing the data, it just has to change.
It can't keep up.
No, it can't. The KuCoin analysis uses a great analogy here. They look at NVIDIA GPUs, which have basically powered this entire AI revolution so far.
Right.
A GPU is like a Swiss Army knife. It is incredibly flexible. It can handle any parallel computing task you throw at it.
Which made it perfect for the training phase, right? Because model architectures were constantly changing and researchers needed that flexibility.
Exactly. But when you move to inference, you are doing the exact same highly specific mathematical operations millions of times a second. You don't need a multi-tool to chop 1,000 onions.
You need a specialized single-purpose onion chopper.
Yes. And in the silicon world, that tool is the ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit.
So ASICs are hardwired at the microscopic level to do one specific job.
Right. They don't have that flexible general-purpose architecture of a GPU. And because they strip out all that extra versatility, they are exponentially faster and consume vastly less energy for inference workloads.
See, I get the theory behind that, but I have to be completely honest here. My engineering friends say this sounds crazy in practice.
Why is that?
Well, NVIDIA currently controls 74% of the global AI chip market. And their moat isn't just the physical chips. They have this massive software ecosystem called CUDA.
Oh, absolutely. CUDA is everywhere.
Right. Almost every major AI optimization over the last decade was written specifically to run on CUD. The sources even mention that migrating away from it to something like Amazon's custom SDK can take a team 2 to 6 weeks of brutal engineering effort.
It is not a trivial switch.
So why would hyperscale companies risk breaking their entire software stack just to save some energy?
Well, the answer comes down to the unforgiving economics of hyperscale operations. I mean, when you are processing billions of agentic queries a day, the cost of running inference on generalized GPUs becomes financially unsustainable.
Even for the tech giants.
Even for them. Let's look at the data from the image platform Midjourney. The KuCoin analysis notes that Midjourney decided to migrate their inference workload from NVIDIA GPUs over to Google's 7th-generation TPUs.
And TPUs are a highly specific type of custom ASIC, right?
Exactly. And by making that switch, Midjourney cut their compute costs by 65%.
Wait, 65%. So they went from spending, what, like $2.1 million a month to about $700,000 just by swapping the underlying silicon.
Yeah, and they achieved higher throughput in the process. That 65% discount is exactly why the heavyweights are all building their own ASICs from scratch. It is all about controlling your own cost structure.
Okay, that makes sense.
Take OpenAI, for example. They designed and released their first in-house chip called Jalapeno in partnership with Broadcom. The report notes they took it from design to tape out in an unheard of 9 months.
Okay, for you listening who might not live in the semiconductor world, tape out is the final step in the design process, right? It's when you finally lock in the 3D blueprint of the microscopic circuits and send it off to a fabrication plant to actually be manufactured.
That's right.
9 months to get a cutting-edge chip ready for the factory is absurdly fast.
It is. And they manage that speed because they use their own advanced AI models to help design the physical architecture of the chips that will eventually run the AI.
That is so meta.
It really is. Jalapeno is scheduled for deployment by the end of 2026. And then you have Anthropic. Their annualized revenue hit $30 billion by 2026. Right. At that massive sustained scale, it makes financial sense to stop renting general-purpose chips and start fabricating your own custom silicon. They are reportedly in talks with Samsung for a custom 2-nanometer ASIC.
So everyone is pivoting.
The shift is so aggressive that by 2026, the shipment growth rate of custom ASICs is projected to hit 44.6%, outpacing traditional commercial GPUs for the first time.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. We have these hyperscalers successfully building these hyper-efficient, custom-designed ASICs to process data at lightning speed.
Right.
But having a super-fast processor doesn't actually solve the problem if it is constantly waiting around for the data it needs to process. We're finding out that compute power is no longer the main bottleneck in AI.
No, it's not.
Memory is.
Which brings us right back to your opening image of the brilliant brain that can't remember where its keys are. These ultra-fast ASICs are literally starving because they cannot pull data from storage fast enough to keep their computational cores busy.
And this is the core thesis of Kioxia's Investor Day presentation, right?
Exactly. Kioxia is one of the world's largest manufacturers of flash memory, and their presentation basically argues that data storage is evolving. It's going from just being a passive digital filing cabinet into the critical active component that dictates the performance of the entire AI system.
So to understand why memory is suddenly the bottleneck, we have to look at the mechanics of how inference works under the hood, especially for that agentic AI we discussed earlier.
Right. These agents rely heavily on a technique called KV caching.
Let's break that down. How does KV caching actually work in physical terms?
Think of the processor, the ASIC, as a Michelin star chef chopping vegetables incredibly fast.
Okay, I like that.
The chef needs constant ingredients. If your memory system is slow, it's like forcing that world-class chef to walk out the back door and down the street to the grocery store every single time they need a single onion or a carrot.
It completely ruins the speed of the kitchen.
It brings everything to a halt. So KV caching is like giving that chef a massive cutting board right next to the stove, where they can store all the pre-chopped ingredients, which are the results of the AI's previous computational steps.
Oh, I see. So when the AI takes its next step, it doesn't have to recalculate the entire context of the conversation from scratch. It just grabs the pre-computed data from the cache.
Exactly. But the more complex the agent's task, the bigger that cutting board needs to be.
And then you add the second technique they use. RSHI, or Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Right.
That is essentially the AI fact-checking itself against a massive external library of real-world data before it speaks, so it doesn't hallucinate or make things up.
Yes. And both KV caching and RSHA require an unbelievable amount of rapid access storage.
But isn't there already memory built into the chips?
There is.
Yeah.
Traditional high bandwidth memory, or HBM, which sits directly on the processor, is incredibly fast. But it is physically limited in capacity and astronomically expensive.
So you can't just slap more of it on there.
No, it cannot scale economically to hold all this external RG data or massive KV caches. So the ecosystem is forced to adapt. NVIDIA is proposing concepts like GPU-connected storage.
Meaning what, exactly?
They are fundamentally redefining solid-state drives SSDs as an extended active memory tier connected directly to the compute pipeline.
Yeah, the sources mention NVIDIA initiatives like CMX for using SSDs for KV caching and something called Storage Next for RH servers. They aren't just saving files anymore. The SSDs are acting as live, working memory for the AI.
And Kioxia is betting its entire corporate future on this paradigm shift. According to their presentation, they are pivoting their business strategy to focus intensely on the data center and enterprise markets. They're aiming for over 60% of their revenue to come from that sector alone.
That's a huge pivot.
They're pouring resources into super high IOPS SSDs.
IOPS standing for Input-Output Operations per Second. Essentially, how many times per second the AI can pull a distinct piece of data out of that drive.
Right. The higher the IOPS, the faster the AI can retrieve its external knowledge without stalling the ASIC. Kioxia sees this specific hardware bottleneck as a massive opportunity to capture value.
Okay, but let's say you're listening to this on your commute right now, and you aren't running a billion-dollar data center.
Fair point.
Why should you care about enterprise SSDs and KV caching? Like, does this invisible memory war actually hit the everyday listener's wallet?
It absolutely hits your wallet because silicon fabrication plants have finite physical space. The insatiable appetite for advanced memory in AI data centers is directly cannibalizing the consumer electronics market.
Wow.
Yeah, the DigiTimes reporting breaks down exactly how this happens on the factory floor.
It's just a space issue, right? Like physical square footage.
Yes, memory manufacturers have a limited number of manufacturing lines. Because data centers are willing to pay massive premiums for high-bandwidth memory and enterprise SSDs, the manufacturers are physically ripping out the manufacturing lines that used to print cheap, abundant memory chips for consumer smartphones.
Just tearing them out.
Tearing them out. They're replacing them with the complex machinery required for AI memory.
Because they are simply chasing the higher profit margin.
Exactly. As a result, the supply of standard consumer memory has plummeted, causing prices to surge violently. The DigiTimes report highlights the upcoming Apple iPhone 18 Pro Max. Because of these soaring memory costs, the bill of materials, meaning the raw cost of the physical parts inside the phone, could jump by $300.
$300 just in component cost increases.
Yes.
That either eats Apple's profit margins alive, or the sticker price of the phone goes up drastically for the consumer.
And the ripple effect is even more severe at the lower end of the market. The reporting notes that memory costs are squeezing margins so hard that the production output of entry-level smartphones is literally being slashed.
They're just making fewer of them.
Right. Manufacturers simply cannot afford to put the necessary memory chips into budget phones and still turn a profit. So the hardware demands of an AI agent planning a corporate logistics route in a data center is directly dictating whether you can afford to buy a budget smartphone next year.
That is wild. The AI boom is literally absorbing all the oxygen in the global supply chain, and consumer electronics are suffocating.
It really is an oxygen drain.
But let's zoom out even further. We've established that the chips are evolving into specialized ASICs, and memory is the new gold bottleneck. But neither of these things exist in a digital vacuum.
No, they don't.
These massive SSD farms and custom processors have to sit in physical servers, housed in physical buildings, located in specific countries, plugged into real-world power grids.
Which brings us to the ultimate physical limits of the AI boom in 2026.
Geopolitics and raw electrical power.
Right. This raises an important question about the global distribution of AI capability. We talked earlier about U.S. firms like OpenAI and Anthropic building custom chips primarily to control their own costs. But Chinese AI firms are aggressively developing their own custom silicon for an entirely different reason.
And to be absolutely clear to you listening, we are just reporting the hard facts laid out in the DigiTimes and KuCoin sources regarding the global supply chain. We aren't taking any political sides here.
Exactly. We're just looking at the market reality.
The reality outlined in the sources is that U.S. export controls are the fundamental mechanism shaping the Chinese AI hardware strategy right now.
Right. The export controls restrict Chinese labs from importing the most advanced cutting-edge hardware from companies like NVIDIA. Since they cannot simply buy the hardware off the shelf, they are forced into a drive toward absolute self-reliance.
Which accelerates their own internal development.
Precisely. The KuCoin analysis highlights two major Chinese AI labs making significant moves. First is DeepSeek, which recently achieved a valuation exceeding 330 billion yuan after a massive 50 billion yuan capital raise.
That's huge.
It is, and they are reportedly deep into developing their own custom inference chips.
The sources also mentioned Zipu, whose GLM 5.2 model saw demand surge 27 times over in just its first week. They are also evaluating custom chip designs.
Right.
And they have to be incredibly clever with their physical chip architecture, right? Because they likely have to manufacture these chips without access to the absolute latest Western lithography machines.
Exactly. They are forced to optimize chip design and software integration to compensate for manufacturing limitations. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this parallel race is accelerating a concept mentioned heavily in the DigitTimes sources, sovereign AI.
Sovereign AI, that sounds intense.
It is. This is the doctrine that a nation's foundational AI infrastructure, the hardware, the data, the models, must be entirely self-contained and locally controlled.
Completely impervious to foreign export controls or supply chain shocks.
Exactly.
There is a quote in the sources from NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang that really puts this geopolitical shift into perspective. He explicitly states that sovereign AI development tops nuclear weapons in strategic importance.
I mean, let that sink in. When the leadership of the world's most valuable semiconductor company compares data center infrastructure to nuclear deterrence, it reframes the entire industry.
It's not just tech anymore, it's national security.
Right. Sovereign AI means that the physical supply chains are increasingly becoming localized national assets. Foxconn's chairman noted that the drive for sovereign AI is forcing data center supply chains to become heavily localized. Nations don't want their AI brains relying on hardware that has to cross a contested ocean.
But localizing these supply chains hits a massive, immovable physical wall. Energy.
Ah, yes, the power grid.
We can design the smartest, most efficient ASICs in the world, and we can hook them up to the fastest Kioxia SSDs, but they are completely useless if we don't have enough electricity to turn them on.
The power demands of these hyperscale inference data centers are just staggering. And local power grids were simply not designed for this kind of concentrated, continuous draw.
To put the sheer scale in perspective, the sources mention that Meta is attempting to lock in utility supply for a new data center push that will require 14 gigawatts of power.
14 gigawatts.
For context, one single gigawatt is roughly enough to power a mid-sized American city. Meta needs 14 of them just for this expansion.
It's mind-boggling.
It's like we spent the last decade designing a revolutionary fleet of massive supersonic jets, right? They work perfectly on paper, but as we start rolling thousands of them out of the hangars, we look around and realize we don't have anywhere near enough aviation fuel in the entire world to fly them.
That's a great way to put it.
So now the airlines are trying to figure out how to siphon fuel away from regular cars and local power plants just to get the jets off the ground.
And the strain on physical infrastructure is acute, particularly in major semiconductor and server manufacturing hubs. According to DigitTimes, Taiwan's power grid is straining so severely under the compounded weight of AI data centers and manufacturing, that the chairman of Pegatron, which is one of the largest electronics manufacturers in the world, is publicly urging the island to fundamentally rethink its national energy policy.
What is he suggesting?
He is advocating for a return to nuclear power just to ensure the industrial base has the basic energy security required to keep operating.
So we are at a point where a digital software boom is literally forcing nations to rethink their physical energy grids.
Yes, the physical world is pushing back.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all these threads together, the landscape of 2026 is completely transformed. We've officially moved out of the training era and fully into the inference era, where AI agents are doing continuous compounding work. Because of that, the hardware isn't a one-size-fits-all GPU anymore. It's a highly specialized ASIC. And we discovered that the speed of those processors is entirely bottlenecked by the need for massive, ultra-fast flash memory, which is physically cannibalizing the factory floor space and jacking up the price of your next smartphone.
Exactly.
And finally, all of this digital advancement is crashing headfirst into the physical limitations of geopolitics and our global electricity grids.
The essential takeaway for anyone trying to understand the future of this technology is a shift in perspective. For a long time, the AI race was viewed primarily as a software challenge, who could write the most elegant code or design the smartest algorithm.
Right, it was all about the code.
But the sources make it undeniably clear that the AI race today is a brutally physical hardware and logistics war. It is a race for copper wiring, for specialized silicon, for high-bandwidth flash memory, and for sheer uninterrupted electrical gigawatts.
The victors in the next phase of AI won't just be the ones with the best algorithms.
No, they will be the ones who can actually secure the physical resources in the real world to run them.
It is entirely a game of physical logistics now. And speaking of the physical world, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Throughout this deep dive, we've talked about AI agents taking on tasks autonomously in the digital realm, and we've talked about the physical power grid groaning under the weight of these systems. Well, buried in those DigiTimes dispatches was a small, fascinating detail. Taiwan just successfully built and tested its own AI-powered robotic dog.
A robot dog.
Yeah, and its first operational mission is to fight fires. They put it through trials where it operated in environments that reached 120 degrees Celsius.
Wow. So it is a literal physical embodiment of the AI agents we've been discussing, removed from the data center and operating autonomously in extreme physical environments.
Exactly. So as AI rapidly transitions out of the digital realm, as it stops just being a chatbot on your screen and starts becoming a physical actor, a robot dog kicking down a burning door in the real world,
Yeah.
what happens when the digital hardware bottlenecks we discussed today become physical bottlenecks on our streets and in our homes?
That's a heavy question.
Right. When that brilliant multi-billion-dollar brain we talked about at the start doesn't just freeze on a server because its KV cache is full, but freezes while operating heavy machinery in a burning building because it can't access its memory fast enough.
The stakes completely change.
They really do. The hardware limitations aren't just abstract tech problems anymore. They are moving into the physical world. It is a brave, slightly terrifying new reality out there, and definitely something for you to explore on your own.
The transition from digital to physical AI is honestly only just beginning.
It sure is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We will catch you next time.